people have been affected by floods in Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh and Uttarakhand. As the situation turned grim in some states and improved in some others, Prime Minister Narendra Modi promised total support from the centre in relief and rescue operations. Home Minister Rajnath Singh spoke to chief ministers of flood-hit states and took stock of the flood situation. 56 NDRF teams have rescued over 26,000 people from the flood-ravaged states.
High-intensity rain has led to floods in many parts of the country. This has meant misery for the lakhs of flood-affected in Bihar, Uttar Pradesh, Uttarakhand, Madhya Pradesh and Rajasthan. Relief and rescue operations are being carried out in flood-ravaged states by 56 teams of the National Disaster Response Force, besides those pressed into service by the state administrations. Over 26,000 people have been so far rescued by the NDRF. Home Minister Rajnath Singh spoke to chief ministers of flood-affected states and promised centre's total support in rescue and relief operations. Prime Minister tweeted, "I pray for the safety and well-being of those in areas affected by floods in parts of UP, Bihar, Uttarakhand, Rajasthan and MP." Home Minister is closely monitoring the situation. He has spoken to the CMs and taken stock of rescue and relief operations. Centre has assured total support in the rescue and relief operations, and I hope the situation in the affected areas normalizes at the earliest. Union Home Minister Rajnath Singh spoke to chief ministers of 4 flood-hit states, Uttar Pradesh, Uttarakhand, Bihar and Rajasthan. He tweeted, "The chief ministers informed about the rescue and relief operations being carried out by the NDRF, SDRF and other government agencies. Have assured the chief ministers of full cooperation from the centre in the flood mitigation drive launched by the states." In several districts of Bihar, floods have caused significant loss of life and property. Water levels have swollen in Ganga, Sona and Gandak rivers. Floodwaters have gushed into low-lying areas in capital Patna. 16 flood rescue teams of NDRF have been deployed in the state.
जब पानी का लेवल नीचे उतर जाएगा वो इसी फिराक में है कि जैसे पानी का लेवल नीचे उतरता है तब हम रुक जाएंगे। उनको आशा है कि शायद पानी का लेवल नीचे उतर जाए, लेकिन चूंकि पिछले 3-4 दिनों से पानी का लेवल बढ़ रहा है तो अब खतरे की गुंजाइश है कि उनको इधर शिफ्ट हो जाना चाहिए। अगर कोई इमरजेंसी में कॉल कर रहा है या वैसे भी कॉल कर रहा है तो हम तुरंत जा करके वहाँ से रेस्क्यू करके ला रहे हैं।
As the flood situation worsened in Bhagalpur, among other areas, anger rose among people over lack of availability of relief materials for them. The circle officer of Raghopur has been served a show-cause notice over laxity in food relief distribution. Nearly 15,000 flood-affected people have taken shelter in 82 relief camps. Riverine areas are inundated in Patna, Vaishali, Bhojpur, Saran and Buxar. However, water level in Ganga has begun receding in several areas. Saran district is the worst affected, with boats plying on floodwaters. Chief Minister Nitish Kumar convened a high-level meeting on Sunday to bring the situation under control. He said that floodwaters have started receding in some areas.
कि अब जो पानी आएगा जो बांध सागर से छूटा है तो वो 3 लाख क्यूसेक से ज्यादा नहीं हो पाएगा, क्योंकि रास्ते में भी वो पानी बिखरा, तो अब उसके आने से थोड़ा फिर हल्का बढ़ेगा, लेकिन जो जितना पानी अभी फैला हुआ है वो धीरे-धीरे सिमटेगा।
Meanwhile, Ganga and Yamuna are flowing above the danger mark in Uttar Pradesh. Many low-lying areas along the river banks have been submerged in Allahabad. People in Varanasi are also facing tough time as many ghats have been inundated and water has entered residential areas. State government officials along with 11 teams of NDRF are doing rescue and relief operations in the region. Around 20,000 people have been shifted to temporary camps. Army has been kept on alert. In Madhya Pradesh, continuous downpour has affected relief operations. In the last couple of days, heavy rains and related accidents have claimed 15 lives. Incessant rains have affected Vindhya and Bundelkhand regions of the state. Major rivers and streams like Son, Ken and Tamas are flowing above the danger mark. 3 days of continuous rains have caused flooding and devastation, particularly in Sagar, Rewa, Siddhi, Chhatarpur, Panna, Katni, Damoh and Satna districts. In Rajasthan, heavy rain has created flood-like situation in 4 districts, resulting in death of 6 people. More than 70 persons have been airlifted over the weekends. Baran, Pratapgarh, Chittorgarh and Jhalawad are the worst affected districts. Army, NDRF and state administration are carrying out relief work in the affected areas and several people have been shifted to safer places. Newsnight Desk, DD News.
A second big question tonight: why is flood fury a recurrent challenge in India? To discuss that, we are joined by A.B. Pandya, former chairman, Central Water Commission and advisor with Water and Power Consultancy Services. Welcome, Mr. Pandya, to Newsnight. Why are floods a recurrent problem despite the fact that since the 1950s we have institutions in place and many more have been added with time at the central level, at the states level as well, for policy making, for forecast and for implementation?
Floods are a reality which is given to us by our monsoon-based climate. We have torrential cyclonic circulation-based monsoon patterns which provides an enormous amount of water in a relatively short period of time. So because of that, the floods do occur. In fact, the Ganga and Brahmaputra plains have been formed because of the floods. So floods are a reality. However, the intensity or the severeness of the flood that we see and the damages, increasing damages that we see, are because of primarily the developmental activities that have been taken up around the rivers without really considering the floodplain requirements of the river. Also, there are structural and non-structural measures required so that we are able to utilize some amount of land from the floodplains, primarily because we are a land-short country, we are an overpopulated country, and we need to have the land. In those cases, the structural measures, especially in Ganga, like some of the strategic reservoirs that are required in the upper reaches of Himalayas, have not yet come through because of international and national reasons. Simultaneously, we have not been able to implement our floodplain zoning act. The central government had circulated it long back, but somehow the states have still not really come up to it. And thirdly, the issue is that the flood relief has to really be very dynamic, and it has to respond to the forecasting that is given from time to time.
Okay.
So
now,
all these issues we need to really address simultaneously.
Absolutely. Now, Chief Minister of Bihar, Nitish Kumar, has said that the Farakka dam needs to be closed down because, according to him, this is causing siltation in river Ganga, which is why the water level has come up. He has said that either the dam be closed or somehow desiltation of the river be carried out so that such floods don't recur so often. How do you respond to that?
Unfortunately, it's not something which is supported by the technical facts.
Okay.
The Farakka barrage is almost 300 kilometers downstream of Patna, and the level difference between the maximum level at Farakka versus the levels at Patna is as much as 30 meters, which, to tell you in a simplistic way, it's like a 10-storied house. If Patna is sitting on the rooftop of that 10-storied house, the Farakka is sitting at the ground floor level. So the amount of siltation that can occur is not something which can be caused by Farakka. Its submergence area does not extend much beyond its about 10 or 20 kilometers. Secondly, the river is not like a normal sewer where we can desilt the sewer and increase the section. River is a very dynamic entity, especially the alluvial river works with it a kind of a balance of silt. It carries with the silt, and then if you deprive it of the silt, it will pick up more silt, and if there is more silt, then it will deposit. This is the geological process that goes on. So the siltation in river Ganga is not something which is caused by Farakka. In fact, Farakka is a lifeline for the country. If we did not have Farakka, we would have found that there will be no Ganga at Calcutta and no Ganga at Ganga Sagar.
So that argument given by him does not hold water. So
that argument is not really based on very sound technical reasons.
Okay. Now, river water interlinking is a project that we have been hoping to implement, and it's also been implemented in some parts as far as the Krishna Godavari basin and Ken Bedwa is concerned. But since the plan is to have it across the country, can that really provide a solution?
Yes, it does. In fact, the Himalayan component of the interlinking of rivers project is also having a very major component of flood management. Especially the situation is that when floods come, the hilly terrain, which has got essentially very steep slopes, creates a kind of a concentration of flow, and a very large amount of flow suddenly gets released in the plains. And since in the plains the river gradients become very flat, the river has a tendency to spread around on a large area, which we then call the flooding. So if we are able to retain that particular volume of floods at the foothills of the Himalayan terrain, then it will be possible for us to mitigate the impact of floods on the plains. For example, we have worked out that in case of Brahmaputra, there are about 5 locations where if we create the storages, we can substantially reduce the flood risk at Guwahati. Similar is the case even in Ganga also. We need to really work on that, and those are the very projects which are going to become the backbone of the interlinking of rivers program.
Okay.
So the flood management is a very essential aspect of the interlinking of rivers program, and we should be able to work on that very dedicatedly. After all, these are the areas, like in China, the discussions on these kind of programs took place for almost 50 to 70 years. So it's not something that we should lose heart about.
Okay, because there are questions that are repeatedly raised with regard to feasibility and the prohibitive cost that this could involve, because there's an estimate that dates back to 2001 which says 5,60,000 crore. There's another estimate which is more recent which says that the cost could be 10 lakh crore. Some also question whether the benefits that would accrue from this would be as much as, you know, once they were envisaged, because of the difference in the water in upper and lower basin rivers.
In fact, if we look at the interlinking of rivers program is basically a bouquet of projects, and these bouquet of projects, each project in itself has got its own benefit cost analysis, and based on the preliminary benefit cost analysis, it has been seen that the benefits that it will accrue will be in much larger way than the costs that we will have to put in.
Benefits outweigh the costs.
Yeah, benefits are outweighing the costs. Number 2 is that whatever money that we are projecting is not a money which will be required in a day, which will not even be required in a year. Probably it will be required over a decade, or probably over several decades, because the progress of the various infrastructural works that will be required to be undertaken for implementing these projects is going to spread over a reasonably long period of time. So from that angle, if we see that 5 lakh crores over a period of, let us say, 15 years is not going to be something which a country cannot afford on a yearly basis.
Okay, so you are saying the benefits would definitely outweigh the cost, but thank you so much, Mr. Pandya, for having joined us on News Night tonight.